Welcome to the Focus Sessions, Africa's online safety TV show, broadcasting once per month on this frequency. My name is Tom Kok and I'm the director of the Aviation Foundation. Aviation has been supporting aviation safety in Africa since 1995. In our Focus Sessions, we inform, inspire and entertain African aviation safety. We provide you insights into the exciting world of safety and its professionals. This season, we're adding something new and exciting. You have a chance to win $100 in each episode. And we do this for two reasons. First, as you will see, it gives you an insight into what inspires my guests here at the table. And the second reason, of course, is that it gives you a chance to win $100. You'll see a web address at the bottom of the screen. And at that page, you can submit the 3 letters that I'll give you throughout the broadcast, and that, together, form a 3-letter code. Every 10 minutes or so, we'll show you one of the favorite books of a guest here at the table. And all you have to do is write down the first letter of the first name of the author. And you'll end up with a 3-letter code. You can only submit your 3-letter code until 15 minutes after the end of this focus session. From among the correct answers, we'll draw one lucky winner and send that person her or his $100 by mobile money. And we'll announce the winner on our LinkedIn page, so make sure you follow our LinkedIn page. Today we'll be looking at the link between aviation insurance and safety. Let me briefly tell you about my history with aviation insurance. When Willis Towers Watson first approached Aviation to ask if they could speak at our conference in Zambia back in 2013, I was surprised. But actually it makes sense. Insurance brokers can negotiate a better deal for you with actual underwriters if you can jointly convince those underwriters that your operators are less likely to lead to an insurance claim than the average African airline or operator. Insurance costs make up a significant part of the cost for most operators in Africa. And so demonstrating safety performance is a key factor to help negotiate a lower insurance premium. If they do not have facts, they will make assumptions. And these assumptions may not benefit operators that invest in advanced quality and safety practices. I'm joined here at the table by Simon Thoms from Willis Towers Watson, and also on my other hand, my regular sidekick, if I could say, Chamsou Andjorin. And we're joined online from Nairobi by Moses Mwangi. Great to have you with us this afternoon, Moses.
Thank you for having me.
But first, Simon, let me start with you. An aviation insurance professional basically from the beginning of your career. You returned to Willis Towers Watson recently after having worked for insurance brokers Marsh, AIG and Aon. And at an earlier stint in your career at Willis, you worked on developing a new insurance market, a product basically for Russian manufactured aircraft. I would imagine that must have been an interesting learning curve.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me as well. It very much was a very interesting dynamic because at that point, most people hadn't been aware of Tupolevs or Antonovs beforehand, even as a flying aircraft. So no one knew their sort of performance criteria. And therefore to try and insure those particular aircraft that had been pretty much been sort of maintained within the Russian environment and to come outside was quite an interesting challenge. So again, there was a lot of attention to try and focus on broadening that understanding into the insurance marketplace, which you can imagine was not easy.
No, indeed, I can imagine. Also because it involved lots of Russian language, I would imagine.
Very much so.
Great to know. Thanks, and great to have you here.
Thank you.
That brings me to you, Chamsou. As some of the regular viewers might know, 40 years in aviation and still going strong. And you always say my career is divided basically in 2 parts up to now. The first part when you, as an engineer, joined the Pan-African airline Air Afrique, where you had initially engineering roles, but soon also senior management positions. And then a shift to aircraft manufacturer Boeing, where you spent another 20 years focusing on safety for Africa in particular, but also some commercial and sales roles. Now, you're one of the founding fathers behind the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa, of which Aviation is also a member. Tell us, what is the Aviation Safety Alliance aiming to add to, if you like, the safety landscape of Africa?
First, there have been, thank you for having me here, Tom, it's a pleasure. There have been a lot of safety initiatives in Africa since particularly 2012, when we formed the Regional Aviation Safety Group, But all these initiatives have been mostly focused in institution, government initiative, and so now we thought that it would be helpful to bring those initiatives to the professionals and aviation professionals and have a dialogue with them on what is the problems and how can we help them improve the performance. Hence the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa, bringing together aviacists and other aviation experts on the continent to strategize and see how best to
bridge that gap,
between the institutions and the professionals.
And let's make sure, of course, Aviation is just a small part of it. There's a whole range of African senior experts and leaders from Africa that are involved. Well, great to have you on the table as well today.
Thank you.
And our third guest today is Moses Mwangi, joining us on the line from Nairobi. Moses, your career started out as a certified public accountant with the East African Bag and Cordage Company. Very fascinating name, I thought. But then from 1996 onwards, you entered the aviation industry. And you worked for a variety of companies, including as managing director of DAC Aviation, and then also chief financial officer of one of the foundation's partners, Rwandair. You're currently working as an aviation project finance consultant, but I was particularly fascinated by that period of the East African Bag and Cordage Company. Do you still keep an interest in the sisal industry, or have you completely left that behind you?
Thank you very much. What I have to say is that, of course, like you said, I started as a certified public accountant, and my main job was, of course, my main specialty was in manufacturing accounts. So I was mainly working for manufacturing institutions, and about that years, and of course, a very much interesting field. But that years ago, I got a bag of aviation, and I've never gone back. I've been involved, of course, in the finance side of it, and of course the management. I've been involved in a number of startup operations, especially on the humanitarian aviation, where we work with the UN World Food Program and institutions like ICLC, UN Peacekeeping in New York. Mainly, I would say that that's where my specialty really lies. But over time, I also got involved in airlines. When Rwanda was a startup airline, I was involved in it from the initial stage, beginning to about even settling it for about a period of about 4.5 years. Mm-hmm. You know, the acquisition of aircraft, budgeting, business plans, strategic focus. Yeah. So I would actually consider myself an aviation expert in both startups and, of course, operational ones. Having said that, I've now been here with 748 Air Services, where I've been working as a managing director for the last 9 years.
So the sisal is way behind you, basically. The sisal was in a long past. Well, good to have you with us as well, Moses. Welcome to the table, indeed. Gentlemen, let's explore the topic of today. And to set the scene about this link between safety excellence and insurance, Moses has prepared a presentation that gives us an inside view of how an operator can go about demonstrating its safety excellence. Let's have a look at your video, Moses.
First and foremost, Moses Mwangi is a husband to a lovely lady by the name of Elizabeth. We are blessed with 4 children. I'm also a certified public accountant, an expert in aviation finance and management, with the experience learning over 30 years in different roles as a CFO, CEO, and also as an aviation consultant. 748 Air Services has been in existence for the last 28 years. We currently operate across Africa, Lately, we have also introduced scheduled flights for the local destinations in Kenya, connecting the major cities and also the tourist destinations in the country. We own and operate a fleet of 16 aircraft that includes 6 de Havilland Q400, 6 de Havilland -8100 Classics, and 4 Cessna Grand Caravans. We plan to increase the fleet by an additional 2 Q400s. The most interesting bit about our very holistic and very calculated growth is that most of it has actually come up during the COVID time. Because there are a number of things that we were able to do and we remained relevant when all other airlines, especially the national ones, stopped flying. That is the time that we flew more than any other airline. Partly because we worked with the manufacturer of the aircraft and we were able to come up with innovations that led us to be able to convert our aircraft from being 100% passenger to also taking full cargo. We were a leader in the whole world where we were actually the launch customer for de Havilland on what is normally now referred as a simplified cargo kit. So in the process, our numbers of employees jumped from 250 employees to our current level, which is about 400 employees. We have a number of factors that really differentiates our product. And the main one, it's actually what sometimes looks like it's basic, but actually that determines the success of the company. And that is our company corporate culture. Company corporate culture is real cardinal to everything that we do. When we hire our employees for 2 months, we induct them because we realize that if you get your staff right and they have the right attitude, they understand where the nature and the culture of the company. We are very, very proud to say that we have a corporate culture that really incorporates a lot of teamwork, enhances safety and quality, and of course, introduces the issue of customer satisfaction. And what can I say? All the three are actually our core values. The second facet that separates us is our safety culture. Our safety culture goes beyond what is required by the regulatory bodies. First, we always and all the time, we are always carrying out safety campaigns. And this all arises from the trend that we see from our SMS system, which I will refer to here as a safety cube, where everybody reports all the hazards that come across. And from this, we are able to kind of come up with a risk profile. And from this risk profile, we are able to work out what areas we need to emphasize. And with that, we carry out what we normally call safety campaigns. We are maybe the only company in the whole world where all our fleet is also part of the FDM program, Flight Data Management Program, that reports online, real time, on exactly what is happening during the flight. The interesting one, and we have realized it from the manufacturer of the program, we are the only company in the whole world that has also the caravans included in this program. The third angle is the training. Our training starts with induction. Every time we have new employees, they spend the first 2 months and induction and how we do things. Then, of course, there is technical training where most of it is actually done internally. We have trained trainers from the best in Europe and America. Again, having said that, every now and then we involve outsiders. Flight safety is one of the organizations that we invite once in a while to come and conduct training and also review our staff, especially the flight crew. We have come up with a custom-made, tailor-made FEMA system that tracks all our training. And what normally happens is that the system sends alerts to all the managers involved. The fourth one is the audits. The audits are divided in different areas, and here I'm talking of the internal ones and the external ones. And our lead one is actually the internal one. We have 4 departments in a company that carries continuous perpetual audits, giving findings, and those findings are reviewed every 2 weeks by senior management. That includes even our chairman. External audits, I'll divide them into 2. There is the regulatory one, and of course there is the client's audit. The regulatory one is carried out by our local Kenya Civil Aviation Authority that conducts AMO and AOC audits. When we come to the other customer client audits, this mainly involves very, very detailed audits that are conducted almost every other month by UN, World Food Program, UN Peacekeeping New York. We also fall under the Flight Safety Foundation, BAS, where I'm proud to say that over the last 10 years, we've held our gold standard. Risk profile is everything for insurance. The biggest problem of airlines registered in Africa is a perception that has always been there, where the underwriters try and analyze the risk originating from that area. We have a profile where when we are compared with our competition, and this competition is from Europe and North America, where we score higher than these companies that fall under ASAA, and some even fall under Transport Canada. But unfortunately, sometimes, and I have to say, I think some of the underwriters are coming to get our message, but most of the underwriters still do not see this connection, that the most important thing is the envelope that you apply for every client, because it's different. It's different from one operator to the other one. But I will be the last one to tell you that the London market is yet convinced. There's still a very big room. When we look at it, we still see that when you go by the rates that we are charged compared to Europe and America, we are still being penalized by being an African, originating from an African country. And forgetting that our levels are still that high.
Thanks very much for those insights, Moses. Now we'll be looking at 3 main topics today. First of all, why work with your insurance broker to demonstrate the safety culture? Secondly, how can you work with your insurance broker for safety? And lastly, maybe how can you maximize return on investment from the insurance? Well, first, I can take it to Simon here at the table. Simon, I think we heard some interesting insights there from Moses on how at 748 they work with the insurance brokers. What does this bring up with you? What image brings this up with you? What resonates with you from what we've just heard from Moses?
Well, it goes back, Tom, to what you were saying as well, going back to my early days of the Russian business. And it's all about, as Moses said as well, the perception that insurers have of certain risk. And very often with insurers, there's a gap between perception and reality. you have to remember that the big way insurance work is the premium of the many pay for the losses of the few. And therefore there is an overall contribution to airlines around the world into that particular pot of premium. The big question is, how much does each airline contribute towards that particular pot so they can pay for those particular losses? And unfortunately, accident rates in Africa have traditionally been, if you look at the IATA statistics, they've been higher for African carriers than they have been for carriers in both Europe and also in the United States. So with that particular frame in mind, insurers are tended to actually increase the pricing for African carriers as they would be against a North American or European counterpart.
Because they see the continent as a whole, basically.
And they look at these particular statistics they've got, and as a result of which they're saying they need to contribute more to that particular pot than possibly some of the others, because the projection is I'm going to be paying more claims for those types of carriers. But it's a perception, and very often it may not be the reality. And there's a gap sometimes because you have damage to hulls as you have damage to liabilities. And liabilities in the US and Europe are generally going to be far, far higher than they would be for Africa as well. However, there is a high propensity for hull damage in African carriers than there would be. So again, it's a bit of a balance.
And when you speak of liabilities, what is it you mean?
So liabilities to third parties and to passengers. So as you know, if you get on board an aeroplane, you have a liability to that passenger under convention to make sure they get to their destination safely.
Yeah, that's the aim.
If they don't, as a result of which there is a potential liability against the carrier for not doing that for any form of injury that could be made to a third party or to a passenger.
That would be liability. And because income levels are higher in Europe and North America, that means the liability will also be higher per passenger, more or less.
On basis, yes, exactly right. And as a result of which insurers look at that, model that, and as a result of which they sort of blend that all together. And some, for instance, as Moses mentioned, some of those guys will not write insurance of African airlines, where they would prefer to have insurance of US or European carriers,
just to stay away from the risk.
Because they think the frequency of loss is going to be less, even though the severity is going to be higher if there is going to be a claim. But in Africa, it's probably the other way around. You have a higher frequency of loss, but you have potentially less severity.
Specifically on the liability issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That brings me to you, Chamsou, I think. I'm just thinking back of your time at Boeing, at a manufacturer, of course, which equally, I think, wants to preserve its fleet and the operational integrity of its fleet. How did safety come into those discussions you had there? With your airline customers in Africa, for example?
Well, obviously, for the manufacturer, the hull loss is very important. And so safety has always been at the heart of the manufacturer's approach. And it's also a commitment to our customers. So I would look at it from the airline's perspective, where we particularly pay the high attention to have a dialogue with our insurers to make sure that we were not overcharged. So that was achieved when I was at Air Afrique through a constant dialogue with our insurers, sharing with them our safety organizations.
And what you were doing to excel at safety.
Yes, so, and then based on that we could have interesting negotiation.
Interesting negotiations,
yes,
like those words.
And reach a reasonable...
I like that terminology.
Yeah. Yes, but of course there is always a tendency from the insurers to say, oh, you are in a risk area, and this perception, and based on those, this is the level of premium. But our role then was to demonstrate the opposite. Yeah. Yes, we might be in Africa. Yes, there is an environment, but we do the right thing to minimize your risk. Mm-hmm. So there should be a way of finding a mutually agreeable situation.
And I think also, in all fairness, that's what these focus sessions are about, and that's why we're also so keen to work with sponsors like Willis Towers Watson, etc. But because these focus sessions also help us tell the story of Africa to the outside world. Because yes, our premium watchers might be professionals in Africa, but there's also professionals from other places tuning in. Now, before we go to the next item on the agenda, I promised you 3 letters for your 3-letter code. The first book we have here on the table today is a book by Gaël Faye, Petit Pays, and it's about the first letter of the first name, which is the letter G, Golf, which you need for your code. So that's your first book. Also a nice recommendation, but also the letter, of course, is particularly what you're interested in. Simon, if I come back to you briefly before I then switch to Moses online in Nairobi. Moses gave us some insights as to how they work with insurance brokers, demonstrating the internal audits, the external audits. 748 is of course a fairly large operator already. I'm thinking of smaller operators, maybe even actually airports or air navigation service providers. Any suggestions how they can demonstrate to an insurance company that they're doing more than the average person is?
Well, taking Moses from when 748 started, they were obviously a small carrier as well, flying 748 aircraft when they first came around at some stage as well. So they were a couple of aircraft at that stage and have now grown over that particular period. So taking insurers through that particular growth phase is important. We think the role of the broker, we are the interface for the client into the insurance market. We believe there are potentially 80 insurers out there who could write aviation insurance on a worldwide basis. Yeah. Our job is to make sure we can give access to those as best as we possibly can. And I guess the recommendation would be for whoever you choose would be try and place your insurance as best as you possibly can with the best broker to get as much of a spread across those 80 insurers as you possibly can. Because insurers will come in and out of the marketplace depending upon their particular financial performance. They may all of a sudden go through a period where they want to grow, so therefore they're looking to go into new areas of risk where they possibly haven't traded before.
Which could be Africa.
It could be Africa, where previously before they've looked at it and thought they don't want to get involved.
And am I getting you right when you say there's roughly 18 insurance companies that take these risks in a way? Would that mean that of a particular aircraft you could have 5 or 6 underwriters who underwrite one operation? Is that how it works?
Very much so. So it's sort of taking car insurance and sort of calling it car insurance on steroids and blowing it all up. And potentially on most policies you're going to have between sort of 10 and 25 insurers making up a standard airline insurance policy, because the limits and size of values of aircraft and liability limits are bigger than one particular insurer wants to take on board their balance sheet. So the risk is subordinated across all those very different 80 insurers, and therefore it becomes a supply-side economic discussion.
And Moses, if I can take this to you, I mean, Chamsou was just using the words "interesting discussions," which I think is a very nice word. You like that?
I'm going to take that actually. Yes.
How does it happen for you? How does it work for you when you come to your yearly renewal of your policies? How interesting are those discussions? Do you manage to push the boundary all the time, basically?
Yes, I have to say that what we try to do, especially most of the time, we organize with Willis, our broker, where we visit the London market, and we meet with major underwriters every now and then. Willis also does a fantastic job where they also bring some underwriters down here in Africa, where we are able to take them around and they see exactly what we are doing, what separates us and differentiates us. But having said that, when you look at everything, and like Simon was trying to explain here, there's the issue of the hull, there's the liability, and there's the war risk. On all the 3 categories, you would actually imagine that maybe Europe and North America pays more for liability. You'd be surprised, we still pay more for the liability.
Okay.
If you are coming from Africa. So you pay more for hull, you pay more for liability, you pay more for war. And I have had, because sometimes even when you buy an aircraft, it's interesting because we know that the liability levels in America, if you are flying American cities, it's about like double the European one. Mm-hmm. And then when you fly Mediterranean and you enter Africa, then of course it comes down. But what I'm trying to say is that maybe what the underwriters really need to understand, and I know this pooling of this insurance principle really penalizes us. It really penalizes Africa, because whilst we have a very high growth in aviation, I think currently we are talking, it's the only continent that the growth is more than 6%. Mm-hmm. And in a place like Kenya, we are talking of more than 10%, 1 year to the other. In aviation, passengers growth and all that. So with that, you can also imagine that there will always be the initial teething problems, even with regulatory bodies. But I can tell you, even when you look at a country like Kenya, there has been a lot of improvement. We used to hear of accidents, even in countries like DRC, you would have an accident very often. And I can say the civil aviation, they have worked very, very, very hard. We don't hear of any more of these accident incidences. And the same thing in Southern Sudan, Somalia. So there has been a lot of improvement. The other one, when you talk about war risk, where it's actually hefty in Africa, and I think in most of these other continents, like in Europe and North America, you really have anything to do with the war risk. War risk has been a very small proportion of the insurance until the last 3-4 years, where it's gone wild, and it has multiplied by maybe 4 times. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is that when you start talking about the war, of course, there are all these, and we talk about the terrorists, we talk of the Al-Qaeda and all these operations and everything. When you go back to it, you actually find that in Africa, we've not had any incidents, especially coming, on aircraft, that is as a result of terrorism, yeah, or even war.
Yeah, and that has to do, I think, also with that perception, isn't it?
But you also find that still Africa, there is the perception that Africa, we are going to have more claims on war.
Yeah.
Even when they don't happen. I will surprise you. Everybody talks about, you hear people talk about Somalia, you hear even people talk about Libya, but we haven't had an incident, not a single one.
That brings it back to that assumption indeed that people make, of course, and the perceptions people have, which we're only trying to change with these kind of programs as well, and of course professionals. It's easy to forget, of course, for the outside world that also in Africa, thousands upon thousands of professionals work really hard to make it the safest form of transport. Absolutely. Also in Africa. I want to take you to a question from Africa, actually, and then we'll come to the next letter for the book. So those of you out there wanting to win the $100, keep your pen ready. This is a question from Zambia, from Kapemwa. To what extent would it be beneficial to seek insurance cover when safety performance is low? So basically, as an operator, whether you're an airline or ANSP, maybe the suggestion could be, while you're still working on it, let's not have insurance. Do you see that as feasible?
I think it is. At the end of the day, you buy insurance to transfer your risk off your balance sheet. So therefore, if you were to try and retain risk on your balance sheet, you would probably have to put, I would imagine, considerable vast of sums of capital aside to cover that particular eventuality. Therefore, you're probably going to have to get some form of insurance, which is going to be far more cost effective than keeping it on your balance sheet, no matter what the cost is going to be.
Keeping on your balance sheet, meaning keeping a reserve, keeping your kitty basically.
Exactly, and there becomes a cost of capital calculation. And as Moses knows, if he wants to try and keep that 16 aircraft portfolio on his balance sheet, he's probably going to have to put aside a far greater sum to cover the eventualities that he may face than he would be by going and buying an insurance product in the marketplace.
So basically the answer to Kapemwa is that even if your performance is not that good, it makes good sense to get insurance, whether you're an airport, an airline or an air navigation service provider.
I would say it's a very effective product of taking that particular risk off your balance sheet, which you can then subsequently improve as your processes and procedures work through the system.
And then hopefully lower in those good discussions, interesting discussions, lower those premiums.
Absolutely.
We get to the next book, a very famous, very old book. A Christmas Carol, which is written by Charles Dickens. Difficult to see here, I think, but it's the C for Charles, also Charlie. I think you took this book.
I did indeed, yes.
So, in a minute, why did you take this book?
Very topical, very seasonal, but not, yes, exactly. Real reason, it's a life-affirming story whereby money is not the route to happiness, and it's all about one particular person whose redemption in life shows the fact that he can actually make a difference, and I find it very, very heartwarming and life-engaging.
Well, it's a good Christmas story, but also a story throughout the year then, basically.
Very much so. You can adopt it when you can do.
You can adopt it when you can. So that was the second letter indeed. We have another question here from Sahiru. I think he was from Niger. And maybe this also relates to Chamsou, to your work in the moment as well, as particularly when you were with the aircraft manufacturer. But let's start with Simon. How often do insurance brokers communicate to raise employees' awareness? So do you have direct communication as an insurance broker with the staff of, for example, Moses, or does it always go through the operator itself?
Usually go to the operator itself, and we would like to, we have in the past hosted insurance seminars. So again, if there is an accident, what do you do? Because that will also involve not only Moses in terms of CFO and CEO level, that will also spread right through the organisation. So it will go to Director of Flight Operations, it will go to ground handling, it will go to maintenance, because at some point somebody's going to be involved in the reasons for that actually happening at some stage. So we believe that prevention is always better than the cure, and preparation is the quite key of all of that, so that when things actually happen, people know exactly what's going to be required of them.
And that comes down to indeed information flows both in the organisation between Moses and his staff, but also from the operators. And then again, now we're talking about airlines, but it could also be an airport or an ANSP to make sure they have a very regular dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, people, and that's maybe why I was surprised when Willis Towers Watson approaches those 9 years ago. Initially you think, well, maybe it's better to hide what happens in my organisation. And that to me was new. The fact that brokers are actually interested in finding out.
And Tom, I think it's also worth putting out that insurance generally is one of those subjects where people literally will turn off. And we all buy insurance as we do for our cars and our homes.
What do you mean turn off?
Sorry, turn off. It's one of those unnecessary evils, people call it. You know, I have to buy insurance. I don't want insurance, but I have to have it. And as a result of which they sort of look at it and go, well, in that case, I want it for the cheapest cost possible, and I'll deal with it, and it'll be there, and then I can move on to more important things.
Yeah, and I won't talk to these people, just pay the premium basically. Whereas we've learned from Moses' presentation, and also from you, I think, this morning, and from the discussion that Chamsou brought in, the point that Chamsou brought in, that having these conversations internally and externally are very important. That's also where, as Aviassist, you know, as a small player, obviously, we try to change that. And the same with the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa. There also, it's about internally, you know, we want to make sure that Africa keeps working on the safety in line with what Moses said, but we also want to make sure that the rest of the world sees what we're doing. And that's I think also your initiative of the Alliance was stemming from that, isn't it? That the Flight Safety Foundation, of which you are part, you're part of the International Advisory Committee, was doing too little, in our view, to share the stories of Africa.
Because they know little about the story of Africa is not told. So we also expect to tell more about the Africa story and share that with the international community of the Flight Safety Foundation.
And I think, you know, that in many ways is something we have to take to heart. We have to improve, all of us, because we're all passionate safety professionals. But we're very often, and I'm a good example of that myself, you know, as a trained lawyer, I'm used to having long stories, long sentences. But if we want those stories to be interesting for the outside world, they have to be short, sweet, and snappy, which is neither an insurance broker's forte nor a lawyer's forte, I think, in that respect. Yes. Let me bring the last letter in for today's 3-letter code for your chance to win $100. This book, I think, was brought to us from Moses. It's Execution, and it's written by Larry Bossidy. So it's the letter Lima that you need as the last letter for the 3-letter code today. Unfortunately, Moses, we don't have time to go into why you chose this book, but maybe in a future session we can talk about that. We're a little bit pressed for time. So if we go to the closing of today's session, and it's always shorter than I would love it to be. I hope it's the same for you, and I hope it's the same for the viewers out there. But Moses, if you have to give one tip, what we can do as an aviation society to change that perception and to change those assumptions, what would that one tip be? Just one tip.
The only way to change the perception is really to encourage the underwriters to visit Africa. Because what has happened is they sit back, they sit in London, they sit in all these major cities, they rarely visit Africa. And sometimes, you know how news are, all the news that we get, international news, is always interesting when you are reporting the problems of Africa, that people are dying of famine and all the other bits. So when the people sit back, they haven't been here, they haven't been able to see what exactly happens, they see nothing else. They just see calamities. And when they see the aircraft, they see the passengers, they see nothing else. They just see the risk. And for them, the risk profile. We have met a number of underwriters in the past, and it's very, very interesting. You meet them in London, and you're trying to talk to them about everything that happens and what to do and everything. But you can still see that they are not convinced. Yeah. But you see, if they come in and come here in Nairobi, visit our hangar, see exactly what happens in the maintenance place, what happens in the flight operations, how we follow our flights, what kind of trainings we offer. Yeah. I mean, they'll be surprised to realize that there isn't any difference. And I can tell you, there are people who have been able to realize that. International organizations like UN Peacekeeping New York, they know it. Mm-hmm. That's why they use quite a number of operators from Africa. World Food Program also does the same. ICRC does the same because they got involved. They've visited the place, they've been here, they've been able to see everything. But the underwriters in London market have kept away. Yeah. And I know, and I heard Simon mention it. I know they have previously they have kept visiting places, emerging markets like Russia, Brazil, but they have ignored Africa.
Okay. So your one tip really is to make sure we get those underwriters to better understand Africa by visiting it indeed. And actually partially, again, these kind of sessions can help. We should find a way to show this to the underwriters, I guess. Absolutely. Because, of course, let's not forget, an operator like 748 represents the best practice. Of course, not everybody in Africa, unfortunately, is at that level yet. So that's what we're all jointly working for, indeed, I think. Chamsou, your one tip, if you can, how to try and change that assumption. We've heard from Moses on bringing the underwriters to Africa. What would your suggestion be?
In addition to what Moses said, which I fully support, it's having that engagement through risk analysis and discuss risk. What are the risks that we are covering? Because that's the language the insurance understand. So if you are conscious about your risk and the way you mitigate those risks, you can easily convince the underwriters of your message. It may not necessarily translate into reduced premiums, but at least there will be a justification for something to be done.
For considering it,
yes.
Yeah, because I think that's important also to underline, Simon, I guess, is, we also don't want the expectation in Africa that they say, well, we have one safety campaign, can we now please have reduced premium? Because you're also looking for a tradition over time, of course, that should be kept in place. Yeah. Over to you for the last suggestion from your type. So we've had Moses, the suggestion, bring the underwriters to Africa. Chamsou brings to the table, we should also involve risk analysis and risk management in Africa, make that more understandable.
Very much so, and I guess to sort of wrap that all up with what was being mentioned by both Chamsou and Moses, if that's okay, is we want to get the underwriters to understand on their side, we want engagement as well, but my one suggestion would be for the client base was to stop looking at insurance as a cost, but look at it as another financial product that you need to invest time and effort and resource and develop relationships so that there is a better understanding of your risk to then translate to third-party insurers. They can then engage themselves as well, and for relationships to work you need both sides. Yeah, yeah. And if there's engagement, as Chamsou mentioned, on both sides, therefore then you'll have a successful result.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Gentlemen all over the table and out there in Nairobi. And don't forget, if you want, you can support our work as well. Visit our website and become a friend or a corporate friend of Aviasys and support our work. Because that way we can tell those stories in Africa, but also the stories of Africa outside Africa. Gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining us here in the studio, and Moses for joining us online. If you want to learn much more about aviation insurance, join us in Kigali on the 14th and 15th of September, when we'll do a full course on aviation insurance with the expertise of Willis Towers Watson in Rwanda in September. We'd also like to welcome you to our stand at Africa's largest conference and exhibition, Aviation Africa 2022, in Kigali on the 12th and 13th of September. And when you're there, join either the aviation insurance course or one of the other 3 exciting safety promotion courses that we'll be offering between the 14th and the 16th of September, ranging from a human factors in aviation course to a peer support training for pilots and cabin crew, and then again that full aviation insurance course. Lastly, thank you out there. Thank you very much for tuning in for safety promotion. Because let's not forget, only you can target safety. Join us again next month for another focus session full of information, inspiration and hopefully also some entertainment for African aviation safety. For now, Murabeho and have a good day.